This is one of those games that is just full of nostalgia for me. If you heard of Fury 3, then you'll know what it is, but what you might not have known is that Fury 3 was one of a very select few games that helped to sell Windows 95. It's interesting because today the game has faded into almost complete obscurity. Now firstly, is it Fury 3? Fury Cubed? There is no Fury 1 or 2, and the manual says that it is Fury to the third power. However, I don't want to sound like a complete bellend, so I'm not going to say that. So from now on, I will be referring to the game as Fury 3. Along with Pod, Fury 3 was a game that was bundled with my very first home computer, which was our family Pentium 2 PC. I have really strong memories attached to that period and specifically to this game. In fact, I remembered this when I started making the video. I can remember exactly the first point in time that I was exposed to this game. It was on one of those old Windows 95 CD samplers. Let me set the scene for you. It's autumn 1995. Bosnia has been in the news a lot. Pocahontas was the big Disney summer film that year. Take That, Never Forget spent 3 weeks at the top of the charts before Blur's Country House came along and knocked them off. And personal computers were being ridiculously heavily marketed as the new must-have item. Bill Gates had got it into his head that Windows 95 was going to be this shiny, all-singing, all-dancing gaming platform. Before Windows, gaming on a PC, it was a bollockake. Just things like getting your DMAs and your IRQ set up for your sound card was a nightmare, and it needed doing for every game. You know, there was no central setting, there were no global drivers for this sort of thing. Even something as simple as calibrating your joystick was just so much harder than it needed to be. Now, Big Bill's idea was to move away from the Wild West that was DOS development and move into an era where all PC software was developed to one set of standards. This would almost guarantee that a game would be compatible with your system, and the name of this set of standards was going to be called DirectX. All they needed were some killer apps that they could bundle with Windows 95. Microsoft turned to Mark Randall, who was a lead programmer. He'd worked on the old Microsoft Flight Simulator. Now, Randall had started his own company called Terminal Reality just the year before, and they had developed a 3D space shooter called Terminal Velocity. Terminal Velocity had come out in May 1995. It was a DOS game, but its 3D engine could be modified to run natively under Windows 95. Not running in DOS mode, but actually running in Windows. The reason this was a big deal was because for the first time, gamers would just be able to put the disc in, and it would just work. Now, Microsoft were going to use this not just to promote Direct3D to other developers, but also to promote it to consumers. Terminal Velocity had got some pretty good reviews that year, so Fury 3 wasn't going to rock the boat. It was just going to be pretty much the same thing, but with this Windows 95 overhaul. Sharper graphics, higher resolution, better sound, that sort of thing. On the face of it, let's get to the actual game. Fury 3 is an arcade-style space shooter. Now, these were big news in the early 90s. TIE Fighter, Descent, Wing Commander, all these sorts of games, they had been mega popular on DOS. Yeah, this was a safe bet to have this as a launch title for Windows 95. In Fury 3, you play a hotshot pilot called the Counselor, and in your spaceship, you are tasked with saving the galaxy by taking down the evil Bion Empire. And that is it. I mean, the story is literally what is in this advert from 1995. Robots bad. The evil Bions have annexed 9 planets, which you are then tasked with liberating. You have to go through all 9 planets in a linear path. Each planet has its own unique look, and it even has its own unique enemy types, which is actually kind of cool. You've got things that you would probably expect from a game like this. You've got Red Planet, Ice Planet, Sand Planet, Gas Planet. The whole planet is a city planet. You've got Ancient Egypt Planet with scarab robots. You've got Underwater Planet with robot sharks. It's got giant spiders. It's got big stompy robots. Wicked. Each level is surprisingly big. Games even newer than this have got smaller levels. Every level is peppered with little hidden areas and secret power-ups, and one thing which is actually pretty unique about this is the little underground tunnels which are dotted around various points of the map. Each tunnel is pretty hard to find, they're pretty challenging to get through, they definitely get the old heart racing as you're zipping through them, and they're always full of like loads of good weapons and ammo, so it incentivizes looking them out. Now, speaking of weapons, your spaceship has got 7 different weapons. These range from, again, your expected lasers and missiles, all the way through to things like smart bombs, and there even is a BFG analog in here. There's nothing super creative here. Certainly there's nothing we haven't seen before elsewhere, but Terminal Reality weren't actually planning on going mad, were they? You know, it's a nice out of 10. The sound effects as well are also very good. They're nice and chunky. The music is actually really wicked as well. It all suits what they were trying to achieve with this game. For 1995, I think this is pretty good. If you wanted to compare Fury 3 to maybe other flight simulations from the day, then yeah, up against like TIE Fighter or Wing Commander, then Fury 3 does feel a little bit shallow by comparison. The only goal really on each level is just to blow everything up. But, you know, as I said at the beginning, Fury 3 was designed as an arcade shooter. Now, back in the 90s, it's worth explaining that the word arcade was basically this really special code word for short games that don't have any real depth. Really, the games are just designed to be fun to play, easy to get through, and then the replayability is based on the fact that the game is madly accessible, so you can just pick it up and have 15 minutes of it. If you view Fury 3 through the perspective of it being this quite short but very bombastic experience, then I think Fury 3 is a pretty wicked game. As I mentioned before, it wasn't really enough for it just to be a wicked game. If Microsoft were going to convince people that Windows 95 was this solid gaming platform, then Fury 3 would need to work out of the box without any mucking around. Terminal Reality's job wasn't just making a good game. Fury 3 had to sell the Windows experience, and so the game actually runs in a window because, you know, it's Windows. So you've got your file and edit menus there, you've got drop downs, file new, file save, file load, all that kind of stuff. The joystick config is right there in the menu. All the sound can be calibrated there. Again, no headaches. And this is a big deal. PC's Own magazine specifically mentioned in their 1995 preview of this game how everything just worked out of the box. They also mentioned how impressed they were being able to move a game window around without the computer crashing. They even mentioned the fact that you could Alt-Tab out as if somehow this was actually a feature of the game. I mean, imagine that. That's brilliant. It really can't be overstated just how important Fury 3 was for showcasing Windows 95. Now, it seems funny now because you're thinking, yeah, well, my computer can do that. But in 1995, your computer probably couldn't do that. You know, if people wanted to play 3D games, then they could just go down the street and buy a cheap PlayStation and they could fire it up, no problems. And Big Bill knew that if he could make the PC just a little bit more friendly, a little bit more like that, then they would be onto something. Now, along with a couple of other sister games, Microsoft's Fury 3 launched to retail in August 95 alongside Windows 95. A bundled demo was included with Windows 95, so Fury 3 was essentially functioning as a launch title for Windows 95. As well as being given away with new PCs, Fury 3 was also bundled with Microsoft Sidewinder joysticks, bundling the game with computers, with copies of the operating system, with joysticks. It meant that this game shifted a lot of copies, but I don't think the game actually sold at retail very well at all. It had a 40 quid price tag at the time, which is shocking. Fury 3 would have found itself going up against games like MechWarrior 2 and Dark Forces in the Christmas 95 window. Now, given the choice, you would buy Dark Forces, right? Especially considering there is a very good chance you already had a free copy of Fury 3 with your computer and your joystick. Now, I think Fury 3 was released here in the UK around about Christmas 95. It's hard to actually pin this down. I can't find any reviews in the magazines until early 1996. The few reviews I have dug up do praise the game's frame rate and they do praise the sharpness of the visuals. They do mention though that basically it is the same game as Terminal Velocity, but in honesty, no one really seems to have covered this game at all. When they do, they all seem to be a bit preoccupied with how impressive Windows 95 was, and that kind of is telling, I think, of what Microsoft were doing at this time. They were obviously squarely focused on launching Windows 95, and so it's entirely possible they completely welched from the budget of actually launching Fury 3. The bottom line here is that Fury 3 is a good game. The shooting is solid, it's colourful, it's fun. It faded into obscurity, I think, almost immediately, but for some reason the game made a lasting impact on me. I still think of this game now. Now maybe you do too. I'm assuming that's why you clicked on this video. Now, if you do remember this game and you're interested in playing it again, or maybe you haven't heard of it and you're just curious to play some random 20-odd-year-old PC game, then I've got good news for you. Getting Fury 3 running on a modern PC is staggeringly easy. The only real obstacle between you and playing Fury 3 is the fact that this game is now abandonware. There are no digital storefronts selling legal copies of this game, and there probably never will be. Microsoft Game Studios, who recently renamed themselves Xbox Game Studios, have made no real indication indications that they're interested at all in selling any of their old PC games. This is unlikely to change, it's not really their focus, is it? So the only legal way for you to play Fury 3 is to go and buy the CD-ROM. The good news is, it's not that expensive. Once you have a copy, it is really quite unbelievable how easy this is to run on a modern Windows machine. Installing Fury 3, in fact, is a lot easier than it is getting terminal velocity running in DOSBox, and it comes with that nice, familiar Windows interface. You can even use an Xbox 360 controller out of the gate. I think that's actually amazing, and it strikes me as some brilliant legacy here, because Fury 3 paved the way for Windows gaming. The idea of buying a game that was guaranteed to work with whatever hardware setup you had, it's really important. And I find it incredibly poignant that that legacy of compatibility is still held up today. How brilliant! Fury 3 doesn't exactly contain a ton of content. I'm a big enough man to admit that. If you've played all your classic PC shooters and you want something more, it would be hard for me to recommend Fury 3 based on the content alone. Back in 1995 when I was 11, I thought Fury 3 was absolutely super. There's something about those pixely explosions and that aggressive electro soundtrack, I don't know, it pulled me in and it held me there. Today, I am boggled to think about what this game represents. So if you do want to play it based on that. Play it with that in your mind, thinking about the legacy that this game has and the important landmark that it represents in the history of PC gaming, even if it is a little bit hazy today. Anyway, thanks very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Ta-da.